session will feature some outstanding international student leaders and activists, and we are extremely grateful for having Lena Folapit-Novel with us, as much as Amanda Harumi, Carmen Romero Rodriguez, Cesar Rodriguez, and Justin Blaine. I will give a bit more details about their vita and their position and background later. But already now, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm really, really looking forward to the discussion with all of you. Before I'm going to hand over to my speakers, I want to say a few things about the topic of our session today. Even before COVID, student unions, organizations, and movements urgently needed an effective mechanism for collaboration. Showed us that we cannot wait any longer. I believe that the pandemic has distilled and has laid bare with quite tragic consequences the injustice of our societies. We've been discussing this in many congresses when it comes to the response, the economic response of COVID-19 to COVID-19 from world leaders. And in general, democratic governments have been competence, while authoritarian leaders are tending to exploit the crisis to consolidate their power and crush dissidents worldwide. That also means that independent democratic student structures have been under particular attack around the world, exposing that we live in an age in which democracy and solidarity as a principle has become a very, quite frankly, radical idea. As students, we have come to live in a time in the world in which corporate and individualistic interests govern most of the decision-making processes and most parts of our life. To consolidate and democracies are being weakened by these trends. Responsiveness and accountability of our governments and international institutions, as well as their capacity to guarantee the rights of the people, are massively undermined. If you think about our generation, we are living through the second lifetime economic crisis. Watching governments, as in I'm referring to 2008 and now the impact of the pandemic, and we are watching governments to failing in these historic challenges because the pandemic is now the most prominent issue on the news. We still have the issue of climate change. We have the massive issue of broad misinformation, economic inequality, and obviously also the topic of public health, in which we fail to address the challenges properly. And this has prompted the crisis of faith in democracy and in faith in the and humanity at large. And this is only deepening the mindset that our generation is in at the moment. And we have to act urgently through our unions, through our organizations and movements to change the situation and build a fair, just and democratic future. This we can do because the students' movement, the workers' movements, teachers and trade unions share a distinctive history. And we have been, if you think about our role in history, on the front line of many, many struggles for civil rights, gender equality, peace and democracy, and many other fights that unionize us. And this heritage should be an inspiration to us as activists now in this critical time, and a constant reminder that history progresses as the result of radical ideas. I think that in order to forge global solidarity through broad coalitions for key movements, which is the topic of our session today, we need to be serious about our politics and understand the power of collective action that is considered strategic and directed, aimed at tangible outcomes. Our movements have a distinctive role. They should be spaces where we can safely discuss ideas. They should be centers of resistance in these dark times. And they are means of socializing a generation into democratic practices and solidarity at large. To be a way for the marginalized to amplify their voices through collective action. And we have to act as catalysts for social movements in which we can bring the rest of society with us, in which we can activate a whole generation of students to fight for these principles. Today, the forces which shape our society, frankly speaking, and I think everybody is aware of that, cross borders. They are not bound to national contexts or regional contexts anymore. And the principle of solidarity, therefore, requires a new urgency. And I think we are here today to discuss this renewed urgency and what it can mean in practical terms. For that, I'm going to hand over to my dear colleague Lena Volapik-Novel. She is the Vice President of the All African Students Union and my colleague in the steering committee of the Global Students Forum. We're going to hear her view on the matter of student solidarity in our world today and what can be done in practical terms. So, Lena, my question to you, how relevant do you think this is as in building solidarity in students' movements, and how can we foster active solidarity that has an impact on the ground? Lena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my opinion. And I'm just going to mute my shut down my camera because of connectivity. Thank you once more, Sebastian. Well, when we talk about the student solidarity, one will be talking about shared responsibilities and mobilization of student organizations, mobilization of resources. When I talk about resources, I talk in terms of material resources, technical skills. We'll be talking about student and youth movements. To me, it is our shared responsibility to keep our differences and embrace collaboration in times like this. Well, it is no longer a one-man affair, but a collective concern. We should not forget that no one is invulnerable to the virus. I mean, the pandemic, 19. We never know when it can strike us. It is a global problem that necessitates a global solution. To me, we are living in a community, and the COVID-19 has made us to understand that we are a community, and in every community, your problem is supposed to be my problem, and my problem is supposed to be that of the communities in which we belong. From statistics, close to 1 billion or above school children have not been to school. They are missing out on education due to inadequate resources, digital divide, lack of technology literacy. Student solidarity will therefore mean rallying our connectivity, global education recovery, and I will be looking at as well at the SDG 3, which talks about health, because to me, I believe there's no education without health. So if we are talking about global student solidarity, we have to think about how we are going to fight the health issue so that it can permit us to be in school, because if we are not healthy, we cannot achieve education. So global solidarity or student solidarity will mean long-lasting inclusive partnership in anticipation for a time like this, with no biases, no partiality. Like I said, we are in a community that must look out for each other. Of course, we have been left out, the youth, in terms of finding solutions to problems that concerns us as the youth. And this pandemic, like you said, Sebastian, has exposed a lot of weaknesses at the level of our leaders. And we can see youths who are able to diverse means of survival through different talents in developing coping solutions to the crisis. Most of them have created learning platforms to assist the students from low-income background. So basically, to me, global solidarity or student solidarity is a situation whereby we are able to come up together as one voice, design solutions, come up with practical solutions to situations like this, because this is just the beginning. We never know what lies ahead. It's like an eye opener for us. So I think the Global Student Forum is a step forward to achieving this. And we implore all other organizations, civil society organizations that are fighting for student rights to join this movement so that we can partner and see how we can come up with a long-lasting solution, especially the fact that we have been left out of the drawing table to decide on our fate. And those who are most affected in this pandemic are the students. They have missed out on their education this academic year. And there are a lot of communities who have never seen a laptop before, who do not know what it is to be digital literate. So forming partnership with telecommunication organizations and all of that in order to push this aspect of digital divide, try to see how we can cope it. I think it's one of the things that is going to help us challenges. Of course, this kind of challenge that we face today. So without much to say, yeah, that is what I think for this first round of my submission.
Thank you so much, Lena. I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to forging these partnerships. And I'm extremely happy that we have Amanda Harumi here. She's the International Relations Director of the National Association of Graduate Students. In the same direction, basically asking about what we can do as organizations once we partner up, as organizations from different regions, different continents, in order to strengthen our impact. So my question to Amanda is, what can solidarity amongst partner organizations, and with partner organizations, obviously we mean primarily students organizations, mean, and how can it be strengthened to increase the impact on the ground?
Hi, Sebastian. Thank you for this question. First of all, I'm Amanda. I'm here represent the students, the Brazil. So I think I need to expose a little about what we have in Brazil, what is the challenges in Brazil. So I prepared some points, what I think is the most important. For begin, in the world, there is a huge gap between countries and when it's come to wealth. So first of all, we need to pay attention to that. Because of that, translate in how the nations are experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the crisis of COVID showed to us how it's not just about inequality development, but also about the power of politics. About that, we have a big problem. The rise of far rights bring along many fascist politics. A rich nation like the USA has purely managed the effects of the pandemic. In Brazil, it's the same. They are far from the great. We are living a permanent first wave that never is slowing down, despite what our government wants us to all to believe. Even when the numbers of deaths decrease, it's impossible to know if they are trustable. Until now, the Brazilian students fight to survive and formed a resistance against Bolsonaro. I'm here to talk about science and student movement. It's not been easy. Constant attacks against science and scientists. The so-called negations are better. For example, recently the government has been trying to force the return of the universities and the students for the campus, even without a scientific approval. The other point that I want to talk about today is the economy points. We are living a big crisis, but what is the way to overcome it? The answer is education guaranteed by the state. In Brazil, the neoliberalism is the other face of education challenges. Has been going a massive cutting back of science and education. The contradiction is that while federal government try to cut investments in science, it's become very clear that science is the only thing that can get us out of this situation. On largely with our public universities, which is the biggest attack at the moment. However, even under attack, those universities has been showing their value to our society. The government, even worse, they are using the crisis of pandemic an excuse to make those cuts in science and education. So the most important question of Sebastian for this event is how the international youth community help the Brazilian struggle. In my opinion, we need to create a space of cooperation and enforce multilateralism power. But we have to build a strong position against the rise of far right, fascism, and social inequality. Because today, all of this is the enemy of education. So, Sebastian, this is my points about this debate. And after we can talk more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. What a strong intervention. I think the point you made about the necessity to have publicly and sufficiently funded education and research and ultimately science is absolutely crucial because this really plays in the hands of those who don't respect democracy, of those who are on the right side of politics. They don't listen to science, they don't want to listen to science, and they use the how do you say how to say that best in English? They use destroying the quality of education and delegitimizing science to propagate their own politics. Extremely important and goes quite well, I think, with Carmen and her political line. I had the pleasure to work with her over the last year, so I'm sure she can pick up on this pretty well. My question to you is which areas should we tackle? Which areas should we tackle from your perspective? And where can we build this solidarity around? And I'm sure you can also pick up on what Amanda said in this regard. The floor is yours, Carmen.
Thank you a lot, Sebastian. Thank you for your work these past days to organize and moderate this session. And also thank you to ASU for organizing this wonderful event where we can all meet and discuss the challenges that we have ahead. Thank you also for your question. I think all of us are living right now really turbulent times, from students to youngsters, the elderly, as well as women, migrants, and unfortunately alone, etc. This crisis is in fact worsening the inequalities that are already existed in our societies, and many governments, as it was mentioned before, have used this health global crisis as an excuse to breach civil rights. And it's the case of students. We have witnessed, as many times in the past, how academic authorities, but also policymakers, have tried to avoid including us in the decision-making process. Regarding the areas of actions from your question, I think first of all we need to keep in mind that we have to have to work on sustainability, fighting for many other things if there is not a planet to live on. And this is something that we need to address globally, because if something that we have learned from this global crisis is that we need global answers to that crisis. Second, I would say equality. We need to make sure that after this global crisis, we don't leave anyone behind, no matter their background. And I can fail to mention, as it was also mentioned before, that women have been especially vulnerable during the pandemic, and we need welfare states that acknowledge and prioritize women as half of our societies and as half of the population of the world. I also need to mention, because I'm European, that I think it's really necessary to address somehow justice and reparation. Unfortunately, the history of many countries, especially in Europe, but not just in Europe, and their succeed has been built by taking advantage of the resources and the wealth of other countries, depriving them from developing their own democracies, economies, and societies. And I think this is also pretty much in line with the rise of the far right. For example, in my country, in Spain, the far right defends colonialism and imperialism as a way to keep on moving forward. For sure, something that has been mentioned as well is the access to education for all, but an education that prepares us for the challenges of the future. We need to fight commodification of education. Education, it's a need for everyone, and therefore it is a right. And regarding not just students, but also youngsters, I think it is important to fight precarity as well. We've seen here in Europe, and I think this is something that is becoming a trend worldwide, is that even though many of us have access to higher education, and we've been told that by going to the university and by studying in higher education studies, we could move forward in our life and we could succeed in the labor market. This is right now not the case because of the private economic crisis and financial crisis back in the 2000s. So it is important that we rethink the world. The generation, the people that we are right here, right now, I think we have in our hands the tools, and we have enough contacts now worldwide to make sure that we fight for these challenges, that we are able to move forward, that we are also able to repair, as I said before, the things that has been done in the past, understanding that I'm not the one to blame right now for what my country did in the past, but I don't want my country to be proud of what we did in the past, because this is not something that we can use as a way to keep on building societies. I think as societies, we have many challenges ahead, as I said, the pre-existing ones and the ones that come along with the pandemic. I would like to mention as well, because Lina mentioned it, that one of those challenges is the way that we integrate digital tools in our routine. And lately, a lot of people has been talking about the digitalization of education. And I do believe that we can use technology to improve and make our lives easier, but we need to make sure that everyone can have an access to that tools, and that higher education institutions are going to have enough resources to make it through the digital transition. If we don't, and inequalities are accentuated, the new normal, it's gonna look quite similar to the old normal. Thank you for your question, Sebastian, again, and I'm really...
I didn't hear the last part. You muted yourself a bit too early, but thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carmen, for your sharp intervention. I'm now going to move on to Jessa Rodriguez. She's the national chairperson of the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, and we're extremely happy to have her. Our question goes in the direction of basically building up these global structures. For us, when we were starting to build the Global Students Forum, it was a huge learning experience, because obviously every organization, every region, every country has a different approach on how to work, different kind of culture of working. And it's extremely important to be sensitive and to use this as a learning experience when putting together any kind of solidarity action, any kind of political action. And my question to you is, Jessa, to what extent is this cultural understanding, this cultural tolerance crucial to building a culture of global solidarity? So your...
Thank you, Sebastian, and it's a pleasure to meet every one of you here in our online convention. So my answer to that is that cultural tolerance can be considered as primary component of global solidarity. It is crucial, especially as we fight against xenophobia, racism, and unilateralism. This past few years, we've seen how intolerance victimized young children who were separated from their parents because of Trump's racist immigration policy. We have also seen how Duterte pulled the Philippines out of the International Criminal Court to cover up more than 30,000 cases of extrajudicial killings where poor Filipinos were executed in the name of his so-called war on drugs. As young and progressive leaders, we all know that cultural diversity does not only make our societies more robust and creative, but it also helps humans to better cope with changing times. And we also must remember that the most important goal in educating others on cultural tolerance is to uphold appreciation of and respect for the human rights and dignity of all people, the cornerstone of human rights advocacies. And as some scholars mentioned, violence is a social disease caused by intolerance. It is our duty as future and present leaders to protect our society and social well-being from this disease. And we must continue to bring people closer together from different backgrounds, religions, customs, values, and other ways of life. The Philippines' national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, once famously said, "The youth are the hope of the nation." And as progressive young leaders who work across different countries, we do not only represent the hopes of our respective nations, but the hopes of our world. So I hope I answered your question, Sebastian.
Absolutely, and way beyond that. Thank you so much for this intervention. Looking forward to hopefully discuss further ways of engagement in the future in the Global Students Forum project. This is really strong. I'm moving on to Justine Blaine, Vice President of the International Union of Socialist Youth. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. The question to you that we prepared is, what has COVID-19 taught us about the needs for global action to solve our common problems? The floor is yours, Justine.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. It's amazing to be part of a powerful panel. Um, Here in Asia, you have the world's best and the world's worst responses to the pandemic. In one part of the region, you have countries, releasing the power of the public funds to help people, developing tech to keep everyone safe, like in Taiwan and South Korea. But you also have countries in dog cages and forced to live with loose change as aid from the government, like in India and the Philippines. And the pandemic has uncovered different issues of inequality under the mantle. It's exposed how our people live under cruel economic systems where they had to choose between their health or hunger for months under lockdown. It also exposed how our health systems are unable to provide health care to the poorest and how healthcare workers receive insultingly low compensation. It also exposed the seething culture of racism and hate with how migrant workers and foreign students are attacked openly in the streets and are blamed for the spread of the virus wherever they are. And these aren't new issues. As Carmen has pointed out earlier, these are issues that were invisible to most of us by virtue of our privilege, and the pandemic has only worsened and brought this out in the open. And our experience under the pandemic should teach humanity two things. And our exposure to a lot of these issues begets all our collective responsibility to not turn our heads away from the issues that we have seen. And with this, the first lesson is that we are only as strong as the weakest person in our society. Years of this culture of individualism and alienation did not prepare us for a crisis of this proportion. And in order for all of us to be healthy and safe from the virus, we all need the bus drivers, the nurse, the grocery staff, everyone that we meet every day to be healthy. And these are workers who are mostly denied of the most basic healthcare. And if we are to reopen borders, we are to open education and work for people all across the globe, we will need everyone to be healthy as well. And we need every country to have access to the vaccine at the lowest price possible. And we need every country to have access to financial help that will help them recover. And second is that we also need a where we help each other because we need each other. And we need a concept beyond charity where we give in a moment of kindness, or this concept of that, where a country provides to another country because it fits their country's interests. And I think that during the height of the pandemic, we see a lot of hope from the student movement, who've thought up um, the newest ideas in terms of helping people. The student movements have harnessed tech, have gone to the ground and built community kitchens to people, have amped up calls for testing, amped up calls for massive aid in solidarity with the workers. And global solidarity is most important because we need to learn from each other's strengths. We need to learn what worked in each other's countries, and we need to be able to help each people across the world and ensure that in every corner of the globe, there is no pandemic is worsening, and we need to get all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another extremely powerful contribution. I'm super happy about the discussion so far. Then I think it's the time now to open up to colleagues from the All African Students Union that have been joining us in the audience. So I would ask whether anyone here of the participants wants to pick up on something that was said by the speakers. If you want to do that, I think we are a small enough group that you can just unmute yourself, switch on your cam, and feel free to take the floor. Anyone wants to comment? The first one is always the hardest. Don't be shy. We're here to discuss, and it's a fairly small group. Feel free to give us your contribution, your 2 cents to the topic. All right. I think if you need more time to think about what you want to say, I'm going to go back to our speakers panel and give you the possibility to react what your colleagues on the panel said. So if anyone wants to comment on anything that another speaker said, please feel free to take the floor and go ahead if anyone feels like it.
Yeah, about something that it was said at the end of the interventions about charity. I think this is a really important point. Like my father used to say, we're not fighting for charity, we're fighting for justice, because we don't want the leftovers of other people. We want everything because we deserve everything. And I think this is something really important to keep in mind. Because many times, and especially now, we might feel kind of defeated, but we're not. And this is something to, as I said, to keep in mind, to keep moving forward and to keep fighting and to remember what are we here, why are we here, and what do we want. Sometimes it is difficult to remember, but I think these kind of meetings make us aware that we have colleagues all over the world that are fighting for the same injustice. And I think, for example, in this case, GSF, the Global Students Forum, is going to play a key role in the upcoming years, because it is really a place to find ourselves, but also to find those ones that are claiming the same things that we are in our very own countries. And even though we are coming from really different contexts, we have the very similar struggles. And I think it is really important. And I said at the very beginning, but I really feel like this global pandemic showed us that global issues, global conflicts, global problems need global answers. And I would say that it is really, really important to build solidarity upon all of us.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for that. I see that Lena reconnected. Lena, you want to give it one more shot, maybe without the camera, to be sure that your connection lasts through the whole intervention?
I don't know what happened. So basically, I was just trying to say that it's been overwhelming with this pandemic, and there's a lot of influx of information, misinformation, both online, offline, and what we have to do is we have to get the right information, and we know how to handle this information in order for us to come out with lasting solutions. Like Carmen just said, the Global Student Forum is there to try and see how we can galvanize, how we can bring other student leaders, other organizations together, so that subsequently, if we are facing such a situations, we may have I'm not saying that we are magician, but at a certain point we must have been prepared, we must have anticipated for crisis like this, for problems like this. Basically that's what I had to say, and I really want to thank ASU for always trusting me and trusting us to voice our opinions and try to see how we can lead our voice in times like this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lena, and indeed a big thank you, I think, to ASU in general for inviting all of us to their congress, for having such a global outlook in their congress. ASU was also one of the strongest forces when it comes to in the process of putting together the Global Students Forum. So that is absolutely something I think we can all learn from. Anyone else from the panel or from the audience who wants to speak up and give their view on our topic today?
So, if we have time, I want to speak more some things. First of all, thank you for everyone. It's really important to listen what everybody thinks. My mission, like a Brazilian, is show to everybody what is the problem of far right and the Bolsonaro for the world. Bolsonaro is a problem for the world because Amazonia is a richest of the world, and we have a big problem nowadays. And the attack of the science is the attack of the vaccine. This is the most dangerous for Brazil. We have 170,000 deaths, and we don't know if we will have a support for vaccine because Bolsonaro have a politics against China and don't want the help of the vaccine of China. So it's really dangerous for everybody and for the Brazilian people. So what I want to speak here is how the human rights criminals of Bolsonaro, it's a universal problem. We need speak all of this for the we need a collaboration of everybody. How is a problem of Bolsonaro for the world? So we have changes, and I really hope to this can help in Brazilian now.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Anyone else who probably wants to also give a bit more of an overview of the national perspective that you're having? I think it's super interesting to hear that from people on the ground. So if anyone wants to speak up about that, please feel free to do so. And we have a message in the chat. Oh yeah, all right, fair enough. I can understand that. Anyone else wants to say something? We still have a few minutes left, if you feel like it.
Hi again. I'm Jessa. I'm from the Philippines, and one of my comrades here is Justin. So we came from the same youth political organization, which is the Akbayan Youth. But I'm also the chairperson of the SCAP. So what I can share maybe here is that as you guys have mentioned, education is also one of the big factor which was affected by the pandemic, and a lot of majority of the Filipino students were affected because of this sudden shift of online classes. So right now, there are different debates on what the student will call. Right now, we have specifically calls for academic break, which is to at least have a pause for the academic classes. And there's also one which is the academic freeze, which basically wants to stop the academic school year of 2020 to 2021. And these issues right now that the students are facing are somehow being sidelined by the government. And what we see as a pattern right now is that the government shut down student activists, which are, speaking up against the current services or the current response of the government in terms of pandemic. You wouldn't believe that our government response to this pandemic is that placing generals, military generals in different offices which are responsible for this for solving this pandemic crisis. So we also recently passed the anti-terror law, which basically wants to punish anyone, either you're a student in any of age, which basically wants to, which basically enables the government to call you and to ask you to report to a police station and explain what are you saying or why are you attacking the government in this social media platforms. And these kinds of measures that the government are placing is hurting our democracy. And the online platforms is making it harder for us to organize the student movement in the Philippines. Practically speaking, the students doesn't have time to join student movements, especially when their online classes or their schedules are cramped and focused on academics. So I think Kuya Justin can share more about some of the things that's happening here in our country.
Yeah, I guess just a brief addition because Jeza has already explained it comprehensively on the challenges that student movements are facing here in the Philippines, not just with government repression, but also access to economic situations that should have helped them. I think the greater challenge for us is to be able to establish a global platform where we can actually have where we can actually have an impact towards each other. It's a huge important step to learn about the situations of students and young people all across the globe, and it's another thing to do something about it. And the wonderful things that I'm seeing, for example, with the uprising that's happening in Thailand, and the protests that are happening in Hong Kong, we've established a group of students who wanted to help each other, and from that group chat, they were able to trace how some of the tools that were used against protesters in Thailand were made in Korea, and now they're making plans as to how they can pressure their governments, how they can pressure the companies based in Korea to stop supplying to to Thailand, because the tools students there who are protesting. And so these are important models of solidarity that would the globe, to be very exciting to see at scale as to how, because each of our systems are connected to one another in this globalized world, we might as well be able to take on that specific challenge to have an impact towards each other and to be able to directly intervene on matters where it's life and or death for young people.
Thank you so much for this perspective also from the Philippines. I want to pick up on something that Jessa said regarding this law where the government can basically cite people to the police station for inquiry for saying things on social media. Obviously, in another dimension, but just to give you a context that this is a global phenomenon. Even in the heart of Europe, we had a huge uprising right now about the law that was passed in Hungary, where I guess you're familiar with Viktor Orban and his politics. They used the pandemic to establish a law that says anything that is misinformation, especially towards the pandemic, but in practice used about everything, can be punishable with time in prison, as in with very, very sensitive and harsh harassment punishment. And this is used against what is left of the free press in the country. This is used against everyone who speaks up against the government. So I think this is a very good example of practice, how the pandemic is used by autocrats to crush down on people who dare to speak up worldwide. And yeah, I think we touched upon a lot of very, very interesting and important topics today. I'm super happy with the panel, and we have another 5 minutes. So if anyone wants to have some sort of closing remarks, anyone wants to use these last 5 minutes to give their opinion. I see Carmen unmuted. Muchas gracias. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I've dropped a star before when we were discussing about these breaches of or violations of human rights, and I was thinking that, for example, in many countries, and what I've seen in my home country in Spain, it's that even justice is something that applies differently depending on who you are and depending what are you fighting for. So, for example, a bit after the lockdown in Spain, many people that follow basically the right-wing, far-right, demonstrating against the virus, and they were basically organizing demonstrations where they were kissing each other, and there were like thousands of people in Madrid, which was regions in Spain, and these people, even though the police was there, nothing happened to them. They were not defeated by the people, they were not followed by the police, nothing. But when other people started demonstrating separately in the streets to have a better health system, they were in fact followed by the police and they were punished. So this is also the way that, justice, bourgeoisie justice, works within our societies. And I think this is also important to reflect upon, because justice is not equally. It depends a lot on who you are and what are you fighting for. And I think this is something that we also need to address, because it's not fair. Many constitutions, even the one in my country, said that we are all equal in front of the law, but in fact we're not.
Thank you, Carmen. This is quite a hard one to end on. We are all equal in front of the law, but in fact we're not. It is reality, and I think this is why we need to organize ourselves. This is why it needs forums for discussion, forums to network, forums to build capacity in the students' movement to really seize the potential we have in our collective action. And I hope that we will have many, many, many more opportunities to come together in I want to thank Azu one more time for the opportunity to discuss these important matters, and I hope that the rest of the Congress will be as interesting as the session so far. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much to our participants for taking the time, and we'll be in contact very, very soon and continue these discussions in the future. Have a good rest of your day, wherever you are, and take care out there. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We say thank you in Philippines. Salamat.